This is a Wilderness Systems FlexPod OS electronics kit. You can see here you get an assortment of hardware. You get grommets for sealing it off, you get a couple well nuts, and you get some rubber-backed fender washers here. You also get some other washers, and you get another assortment of bolts and nuts here. You also get a piece of closed cell foam. This is going to fit in the bottom of the pod, and your battery is going to sit inside of this to keep it from moving around while you're out there fishing or moving the kayak around. So now I've drilled my holes for the bolts. What I did, I actually ended up using the shorter bolts in the kit because with the longer bolts, the nut wouldn't go down on top, and these nuts have a cap on, so it wouldn't screw all the way in. So I ended up using the shorter nuts to go through here because the Raymarine mount's a little bit thick, and that's just what worked better. What I did is when I drilled these holes, I made them slightly smaller than the bolt itself so you can just screw it in. It threads a little bit. But you look on the inside, and I put my nuts in there, and I put a little bit of anti-seize compound on there. I go in salt water a lot, and this is going to, any salt water that gets in this pod, it's going to keep it from corroding up the bolts. So the one downside on the Raymarine is that this has to go through the pod. All of this, which means you have to drill a pretty good sized hole. So I'm going to use these. I'm going to use a 3/4 inch hole saw, and that actually is the diameter of that inside ring there. You don't want to drill it the same size as the outside because it's just going to fall through. You want to drill it about the diameter of that inside hole because this is going to go inside and this is going to go on the outside. I drilled a pilot hole here and a pilot hole here. It's going to come from the transducer on the bottom through this hole, and then the wire will be inside, and the plug for the fish finder is going to come out right here. And those are both going to have the grommet inside of it. Alright, I have everything installed on this pod now. I'm using a Raymarine Dragonfly, and you'll notice this transducer is a little bit longer than some. So when you install it, you have to make sure you put your mount all the way forward so that this fits in the hole properly. And you can kind of tilt the pod back and put it down through, and I've had no trouble with this fitting in the scupper hole at all. And you'll see here I use these grommets. I put the slit in the grommet to fit the wiring through because the end on this is kind of big and you can't slide it through this, so I had to put a small slit on here, slide the wire through, and then pop the grommet into the hole. And I did the same thing on the top here. You know, this is kind of big, so it's not going to fit through that little hole unless you cut it and slide it over the wire. Another thing I did here, I installed a piece of Yakutech gear track so I could mount a ram ball in that, and I actually had to cut this track down a little bit, which isn't a big problem. You just use a standard hacksaw, then you file it down to make everything nice and smooth so it doesn't cut anything, it doesn't cut in your wiring or your fishing line. And that's attached to the top here with 2 bolts. Inside, what I've done is I put a little bit of marine sealant around these bolts to keep it a little bit more waterproof. I didn't install any waterproofing on here. I actually did try marine sealant. It doesn't stick to the grommet. It came right off. But I've used this pod for 2 days now, and it got no water in it at all. I also modified the closed cell foam a little bit. I cut around it. I cut about 1/4 inch all the way around that. And the reason I did that is because if you're worried about it being totally watertight, if you get a big rain or something, you're going to get a little bit of water through here. I put some pretty standard adhesive-backed foam on here and put that around the top. It makes it a little bit tight to shut down, but it's going to keep some water out of there. The other thing I did is I put hot glue on top of my battery terminals. It's a push-on terminal that goes on here on the end of the wire. I put it on, put hot glue on here. It makes it nice and tight. I took a trailer hitch connector. Half of this is going to go on your battery. The other half is going to go to the wiring that's inside your fish finder. So all you have to do is plug this in and you're ready to go. And the reason I cut out the closed cell foam is because I'm using a dry bag around the battery. I shove the battery down in here, I hook the connections up, I roll this tight on top. It fits really nice down into that little the hole that I enlarged there, and it's going to be completely waterproof. You don't have to worry about making the pod waterproof. It's not going to fill up with water. It'll be fine. So you can see I now have my fish finder mounted on top of the pod with the ram ball. Raymarine has a similar type ball that goes into the back of their newer units. I modified a ram ball and used a Raymarine bolt that goes into the fish finder and just put a standard ram screw ball on there, so it works really good. You can take this off, a little bit of adjustability here. You can also take this off and put it on the slide track on the side of your boat, pull out a little bit of extra wiring so you can mount your fish finder on the side of the boat if you wish to do so. Inside the pod, you can see I have my dry bag slid down into the closed cell foam. There's the wiring. The one thing you want to do is keep a little bit of grease on this bolt. It's going to save a lot of pain if you get any kind of salt water down in there or get sand on that screw and it gets down in here. You can strip your threads really easy, so putting a little bit of just any kind of grease on this, especially dielectric grease if you're working in fishing in salt water, that'll help keep that clean. There you go. That's the fish finder install using the Wilderness Systems electronics kit.